welcome to Ask Me Anything, a series from Security Magazine where security leaders answer your questions about the industry, from best practices for risk management to the ins and outs of their position. I'm your host, Madeline Laver, Editor-in-Chief at Security. Today, I'm joined by Todd Jones, Director of Campus Safety at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Prior to his current role, Todd led and supported campus safety efforts at a number of institutions, including as Associate Director of Public Safety at Hamline University and as Campus Safety Supervisor at Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. He also brings leadership experience from his role as Corporate Security Specialist at Health Partners and nearly 2 decades of service training security officers. Welcome, Todd.
Welcome. Thanks, Madeline. Thanks for the warm introduction, and glad I could be a part of this.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get into it. Readers from across all of our social media platforms submitted their questions for you today, so we can get started. The first question that we received is, how did you get your start in security and campus safety?
Sure. So I was in school for law enforcement and needed a job, so I started working in a private security company, working a lot of entry-level positions in hotels. And as I got older and matured, I started looking for a job with benefits. And so I stumbled upon a job at a community college. Um, and the hours were great. I worked Monday through Friday, but it also kind of fit in where uh, my philosophy is right now is care over enforcement. And so the um, college security departments kind of lean towards educating over disciplinary type action. So that's what kind of drew me to higher ed. And so since then, I've loved it ever since.
That philosophy of care over enforcement is really interesting. I'm sure we'll get into it more over the
Yeah,
conversation. I
absolutely.
know, like, rising through the ranks in the security field is a really interesting way to enter the profession as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Another question that we received from readers was from a reader was, what are some of the main challenges that security teams face in higher ed environments?
Mm. Uh, Unique to higher ed, I think it's accessibility over security. We have admission implications that we have to think about. And so, what I mean by that is when someone comes to visit, um, it could be one or two reactions from the parent or the student. Wow, this place is really secure. Is it safe? Or wow, this is really inconvenient. I don't want to come to this school. So we're constantly trying to find that balance. Um, the other part I would say is mental health. Since COVID, well, in a post-COVID atmosphere, we've struggled with finding uh, different ways how students are reacting to environment after post-COVID. And so we're trying to meet the students where they are and trying to better um, provide resources for those students. And so I think higher ed is it's not unique to the mental health aspect or what we're experiencing today in America, but I think it's kind of the situation is exacerbated just with the added stress of school and being away from their family.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also, the campus as kind of like a microcosm of a town or a wider community, I'm sure that those
Absolutely.
issues kind of come to a head. You mentioned as well, like, the balance between security and openness and, like, inconvenience. Could you expand on that a little bit? How are you balancing tech or security measures and openness of the campus?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So um, so right now our campus is you need a card to get into our campus in any door. So it's fully locked down, but we also want to be inviting because we're an art school and we want people to see the art that the students are creating. And so um, we try to create measures where people have to check in any door they come into. So that way we know who's in the building and no one is piggybacking. Obviously, it's not 100% foolproof, but people do get in without checking in. but that's a way that we can still provide security, but try to inconvenience the community as least as possible.
That makes a lot of sense, and thank you for going into that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had another reader question that asked, what are your top 3 security priorities looking forward to the rest of 2023 and in 2024?"
Sure. Again, mental health support. So, kind of um, building on the resources we already have in place, reaching out to community partners. Um, there are several around the metro here in Minneapolis agencies that will respond in mental health emergencies. So, reaching out to those people and creating those relationships where we know we can call them and they'll show up. Working with the school to try to provide resources that are after hours other than our security staff. Um, Another big thing is transitioning our programs to um, web-based and cloud-based. So our officers can be out in the field and still be able to see cameras, access their report writing software, unlock a door via their phone. And so getting those systems in place so we can be more efficient and be essentially in more than one places. As you know, sometimes we have single officers, so and so those officers can be in more than one place. And I think improving interoperability would be another priority. Getting a radio system that works consistently and every time. We're really leaning on FirstNet, the first responder network, to kind of accomplish that. And lastly, I would say body worn cameras. And so just to create accountability on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the tech that you went into is really interesting, and it makes me think of how it can really help expand the reach of a security team. I mean, talking about that efficiency and having that mobile aspect. And the mental health partnerships that you brought up connected really well to another reader question that we had, which was, could you speak to the importance of partnerships in campus safety? Could you expand on those mental health ones as well as partnerships with other organizations?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So just to talk about expanding our fostering relationship with community members. So, you know, a big part of my job is to engage with the community. Being the urban campus, we have a lot of neighbors that they're really interested in the campus and what's going on in the campus, and so engaging those folks to be eyes and ears of what's happening on the campus, because again, we can't be everywhere at once. Also, we I meet with the metro directors for campuses monthly, and so we talk about different ways we can support each other, talk about new technology, what's working, what's not working. A big part of those conversations is um, setting up team sharing. So if an incident happens, like with the George Floyd unrest, some campuses experience more rioting and looting than others. And so if they have a spare person to share to kind of help those campuses that are struggling to cover shifts, um, I mean, that's amazing. It helps out everybody in the end. So the community building aspect is huge. The mental health part also, another big part of that is not just meeting with um, the counselors and mental health professionals, also meeting with law enforcement and telling them, like, when we call and we have a certain situation, um, this is the response that we might need because the is in distress. And so they understand that, um, and I think we have a really good relationship with Minneapolis Police Department. And so yeah, and it's invaluable to make those relationships a part of our daily work here at MCAT. So
And it's interesting too. I mean, in a metro area with so many other universities as well, like coordinating across campus safety departments, that piece is really interesting as well.
yeah, and I think I don't know if we're unique, in that way that we do that. but it helps quite a bit.
Yeah, and something other campus safety leaders can take back to their communities. It reminds me of another question that we received from a reader. I wonder if this is more asking about like neighbors, maybe non-university partners, but how can security leaders best foster security awareness in a campus community, both within it and externally?
Um, I think getting buy-in from leaders mostly. So if I'm going to implement something new, I'm going to have a task force that I'll create, and it won't be contrived of anyone from campus safety or my supervisor. So it's going to be different stakeholders from around the campus. Um, and so in that way, we're getting the outside point of view, and how that's going to affect or any positive or negative reactions, we're going to know right away. And I think that's a big part of it. Um, I would say aligning our goals with the college goals. So as a department, obviously we have our own goals, beside, apart from the school, but just complementing the school's um, goals in a way that um, leaders will say, okay, that makes sense, um, and putting it at a level where the staff gets it and understands that, oh, this is the best thing for us. Excuse me. um, and also having measurable outcomes. So anything that we can bring back to leadership and say, hey, we did this. Crime has went down this amount percent. So, and one thing I've learned being in leadership that college admin love graphs. So if you can put something in a graph, um, it's it's going to get more positive reactions. So
That's an interesting point, and a very important one too, bringing up the importance of metrics and like how you present those. I guess like kind of translating the language of security to the language of like organizational leadership.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we you kind of already answered the next reader question that we had, which was how do you if you had any advice for getting leadership buy-in into
Yeah.
security initiatives? I guess something that you mentioned in your last answer, talking about like getting staff on the same page.
Mhm.
How do you start to do that? Is it like developing relationships, and then when you have a partnership, you can leverage those, or how do you kind of go about that?
Um, so I think you have to use a different type of leadership models. So um, throw out autocracy, and it's more of a democratic and implementation style of leadership. So I'm boots on the ground with the officers. I'm doing what I'm asking them to do also. But in the same vein, I'm also trying to innovate new things and new way of doing things that complement them and make them happy. So it also builds on retention and recruitment. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that retention piece as well. Does it involve like soliciting feedback directly from the officers? Or you mentioned like being boots on the ground, doing initiatives with them. Could you go into that a bit more?
Absolutely. So again, before we implement anything, we're going to have the officer's opinion on anything, and um, so I think that's really important because if someone's uncomfortable with a new type of equipment we're going to be using, that's important, right? Because it only takes one person to cause a rift in the whole department, right? So we want to make sure everyone's comfortable, understands why we're doing it, and where it's going to put us in the future.
Yeah, that base level of comfort, that makes a lot of sense, but it seems like fundamental, but it is so important to make sure that everyone's on the same page there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our last reader question that we had for you today was, with the summer coming up, how can campus safety leaders best utilize this time to improve their programs?
Uh, so a lot of introspection, I guess, for myself, and then as a department also. So what did we do? What did we do well? Um, last year. What can we do better? And just basically focus on um, making changes. For example, our emergency plan, we just rewrote that this past semester. So going through that with a fine tooth pen, doing a tabletop with the administrators, um, and partnering with a local hospital during that tabletop to understand how that's going to work. And then policy updates. So updating policies to match new technology, new equipment, um, things we learned from the pandemic. Um, and then last summer we focused on implicit bias. So we did a whole series just that last summer. So this summer we're probably going to do a series on self-care, and we'll bring in um, different experts in the field to kind of give our officers different flavors and experience different things around self-care to because obviously we've dealt with a lot of more than normal amount of mental health calls, and so that takes a toll on the person responding as well. And so we want to give the officers tool to kind of to help cope with that.
That's a really great point, and I can see too the benefits of having the security team like practice or learn the tenets of self-care themselves, bringing that to then responding to mental health calls next year. But it's interesting to see how that training can then morph based off of the challenges that came up in the previous year.
Absolutely, yeah. I think our mental health calls probably tripled from the previous semester. So um, yeah, that's something that we need to focus on. So
And it connects back too to what we were talking about like getting stakeholder buy-in and working across departments. It's not just security, but we play an important role in that as well.
absolutely, I would encourage people to definitely meet with. So on campus, I meet with our counselor, our VP of Student Affairs, um, monthly, and we kind of just run down any type of problems we've had, any type of red flags we might see, and try to be proactive with those students, um, so we can kind of avoid any issues in the future.
Yeah, that proactive piece is really, really critical and really interesting to hear about too. I think that is unfortunately all the questions that we had for you today, but thank you so much for joining us, Todd.
Absolutely enjoyed my time. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to listening to the Ask Me Anything series from Security Magazine. Remember to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter for the chance to get your questions answered in a future episode. Listen to or watch more of the Ask Me Anything series on LinkedIn Live, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or directly from our site, securitymagazine.com/AMA. See you next time.